Yorkshire is a historic county of northern England and the largest in the United Kingdom. Due to its great size in comparison to other English counties, functions have been undertaken over time by its subdivisions, which have also been subject to periodic reform. Throughout these changes, Yorkshire has continued to be recognised as a geographical territory and cultural region. The name is familiar and well understood across the United Kingdom and is in common use in the media and the military, and also features in the titles of current areas of civil administration such as North Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire and East Riding of Yorkshire. Within the borders of the historic county of Yorkshire are areas which are widely considered to be among the greenest in England, due to the vast stretches of unspoiled countryside in the Yorkshire Dales and North York Moors and to the open aspect of some of the major cities. Yorkshire has sometimes been nicknamed God's Own County, or God's Own Country. The emblem of Yorkshire is the white rose of the English royal House of York, and the most commonly used flag representative of Yorkshire is the white rose on a blue background, which after nearly 50 years of use, was recognised by the Flag Institute on 29 July 2008. Yorkshire Day, held on 1 August, is a celebration of the general culture of Yorkshire, ranging from its history to its own dialect. Yorkshire is now divided between different official regions. Most of the county falls within Yorkshire and the Humber. The extreme northern part of the county falls within northeast England. Small areas in the west of the historic county now form part of northwest England, following boundary changes in 1974. Toponymy. The county of Yorkshire was so named as it is the shire of the city of York, local IJK, or Yorkshire. York comes from the Viking name for the city, Jorvik. Shire is from Old English, scir meaning care or official charge. The shire suffix is locally pronounced shu, or occasionally, i.e., a homophone of shire. History. Celtic tribes. Early inhabitants of Yorkshire were Celts, who formed two separate tribes, the Brigantes and the Parisii. The Brigantes controlled territory which later became all of the North Riding of Yorkshire and the West Riding of Yorkshire. The tribe controlled most of northern England and more territory than any other Celtic tribe in England. That they had the Yorkshire area as their heartland is evident in that Ishurium Brigantum was the capital town of their civitas under Roman rule. 6 of the 9 Brigantian polis described by Claudius Ptolemaeus in the Geographia fall within the historic county. The Parisii, who controlled the area that would become the East Riding of Yorkshire, might have been related to the Parisii of Lutetia Parisiorum, Gaul. Their capital was at Petuaria, close to the Humber estuary. Although the Roman conquest of Britain began in 43 AD, the Brigantes remained in control of their kingdom as a client state of Rome for an extended period, reigned over by the Brigantian monarchs Cartimandua and her husband Venutius. Initially, this situation suited both the Romans and the Brigantes, who were known as the most militant tribe in Britain. Roman Yorkshire Queen Cartimandua left her husband Venutius for his armor-bearer, Velicatus, setting off a chain of events which changed control of the Yorkshire area. Cartimandua, due to her good relationship with the Romans, was able to keep control of the kingdom. However, her former husband staged rebellions against her and her Roman allies. At the second attempt, Venutius seized the kingdom, but the Romans, under General Petilius Cerealis, conquered the Brigantes in 71 AD. The fortified city of Eboracum was named as capital of Britannia Inferior and joint capital of all Roman Britain. During the 2 years before the death of Emperor Septimius Severus, the Roman Empire was run from Eboracum by him. Another emperor, Constantius Chlorus, died in Yorkshire during a visit in 306 AD. This saw his son Constantine the Great proclaimed emperor in the city, who would become renowned due to his contributions to Christianity. In the early 5th century, the Roman rule ceased with the withdrawal of the last active Roman troops. By this stage, the empire was in heavy decline. Second Celtic period and Angles after the Romans left. Small Celtic kingdoms arose in Yorkshire, the Kingdom of Ebrick around York and more notably the Kingdom of Elmet in West Yorkshire. Elmet remained independent from the Northumbrian Angles until sometime in the early 7th century, when King Edwin of Northumbria expelled its last king, Certic, and annexed the region. At its greatest extent, Northumbria stretched from the Irish Sea to the North Sea and from Edinburgh down to Helmshire in South Yorkshire. Kingdom of Jorvik, an army of Danish Vikings, the Great Heathen Army as its enemies often referred to it, invaded Northumbrian territory in 866 AD. The Danes conquered and assumed what is now York and renamed it Jorvik, making it the capital city of a new Danish kingdom under the same name. The area which this kingdom covered included most of southern Northumbria, roughly equivalent to the borders of Yorkshire extending further west. The Danes went on to conquer an even larger area of England which afterwards became known as the Danelaw, but whereas most of the Danelaw was still English land, albeit in submission to Viking overlords. It was in the Kingdom of Jorvik that the only truly Viking territory on mainland Britain was ever established. The kingdom prospered, taking advantage of the vast trading network of the Viking nations, and established commercial ties with the British Isles, Northwest Europe, the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Founded by the Dane Halfdan Ragnarsson in 875, ruled for the great part by Danish kings, and populated by the families and subsequent descendants of Danish Vikings, the leadership of the kingdom nonetheless passed into Norwegian hands during its twilight years. Erik Bloodaxe, an ex-king of Norway who was the last independent Viking king of Jorvik, is a particularly noted figure in history, and his bloodthirsty approach towards leadership may have been at least partly responsible for convincing the Danish inhabitants of the region to accept English sovereignty so readily in the years that followed. After around 100 years of its volatile existence, the Kingdom of Jorvik finally came to an end. The Kingdom of Wessex was now in its ascendant and established its dominance over the north in general, placing Yorkshire again within Northumbria, which retained a certain amount of autonomy as an almost independent earldom rather than a separate kingdom. The Wessex kings of England were reputed to have respected the Norse customs in Yorkshire and left lawmaking in the hands of the local aristocracy. His brother Tostig and Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, attempted a takeover in the north, having won the Battle of Fulford. The King of England marched north where the two armies met at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Tostig and Hardrada were both killed and their army was defeated decisively. However, Harold Godwinson was forced immediately to march his army back down to the south where William the Conqueror was landing. The king was defeated at Hastings, which led to the Norman conquest of England. The people of the north rebelled against the Normans in September 1069 AD, enlisting Sweyn II of Denmark. They tried to take back York, but the Normans burnt it before they could. What followed was the harrying of the north ordered by William. From York to Durham, crops, domestic animals, and farming tools were scorched. Many villages between the towns were burnt and local northerners were indiscriminately murdered. During the winter that followed, families starved to death and thousands of peasants died of cold and hunger. Orderic Vitalis puts the estimation at more than 100,000 people from the north died from hunger. In the centuries following, many abbeys and priories were built in Yorkshire. Norman landowners were keen to increase their revenues and established new towns such as Barnsley, Doncaster, Hull, Leeds, Scarborough, Sheffield, and others. Of towns founded before the conquest, only Bridlington, Pocklington, and York continued at a prominent level. The population of Yorkshire boomed until hit by the Great Famine in the years between 1315 and 1322. In the early 12th century, people of Yorkshire had to contend with the Battle of the Standard at Northallerton with the Scots, representing the Kingdom of England, led by Archbishop Thurstan of York. Soldiers from Yorkshire defeated the more numerous Scots. The Black Death reached Yorkshire by 1349, killing around a third of the population. Wars of the Roses. When King Richard II was overthrown in 1399, antagonism between the House of York and the House of Lancaster, both branches of the royal House of Plantagenet, began to emerge. Eventually the two houses fought for the throne of England in a series of civil wars, commonly known as the Wars of the Roses. Some of the battles took place in Yorkshire, such as those at Wakefield and Towton, the latter of which is known as the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. Richard III was the last York's king. Henry Tudor, sympathiser to the House of Lancaster, defeated and killed Richard at the Battle of Bosworthfield. He then became King Henry VII and married Elizabeth of York, daughter of Yorkist Edward IV, ending the wars. The two roses of white and red, emblems of the houses of York and Lancaster respectively, were combined to form the Tudor Rose of England. This rivalry between the royal houses of York and Lancaster has passed into popular culture as a rivalry between the counties of Yorkshire and Lancashire, particularly in sport, although the House of Lancaster was based in York and the House of York in London. In football, matches between Manchester United and Leeds United are usually described as War of the Roses games, the team's home kits being the colour of the respective rose. Saints. Civil War and textile industry. The wool textile industry, which had previously been a cottage industry centred on the old market towns, moved to the West Riding, where entrepreneurs were building mills that took advantage of water power gained by harnessing the rivers and streams flowing from the Pennines. The developing textile industry helped Wakefield and Halifax grow. The English Reformation began under Henry VIII, and the dissolution of the monasteries in 1536 led to a popular uprising known as Pilgrimage of Grace, started in Yorkshire as a protest. Some Catholics in Yorkshire continued to practice their religion, and those caught were executed during the reign of Elizabeth I. One such person was a York woman named Margaret Clitheroe, who was later canonised. During the English Civil War, which started in 1642, Yorkshire had divided loyalties. Hull famously shut the gates of the city on the king when he came to enter a few months before fighting began, while the North Riding of Yorkshire in particular was strongly royalist. York was the base for royalists, and from there they captured Leeds and Wakefield, only to have them recaptured a few months later. The royalists won the Battle of Adwalton Moor, meaning they controlled Yorkshire. From their base in Hull, the parliamentarians fought back, retaking Yorkshire town by town, until they won the Battle of Marston Moor and with it control of all of the north of England. In the 16th and 17th centuries, Leeds and other wool industry-centred towns continued to grow, along with Huddersfield, Hull and Sheffield, while coal mining first came into prominence in the West Riding of Yorkshire. Canals and turnpike roads were introduced in the late 18th century. In the following century, the spa towns of Harrogate and Scarborough flourished, due to people believing mineral water had curative properties. The 19th century saw Yorkshire's continued growth, with the population growing and the Industrial Revolution continuing, with prominent industries in coal, textile and steel. However, despite the booming industry, living conditions declined in the industrial towns due to overcrowding. This saw bouts of cholera in both 1832 and 1848. Fortunately for the county, advances were made by the end of the century with the introduction of modern sewers and water supplies. Several Yorkshire railway networks were introduced as railways spread across the country to reach remote areas. County councils were created for the three ridings in 1889, but their area of control did not include the large towns, which became county boroughs, and included an increasing large part of the population. During the Second World War, Yorkshire became an important base for AF Bomber Command and brought the county into the cutting edge of the war. Yorkshire today. In the 1970s there were major reforms of local government throughout the United Kingdom. Some of the changes were unpopular, and controversially Yorkshire and its ridings lost status in 1974 as part of the Local Government Act 1972. The East Riding was resurrected with reduced boundaries in 1996 with the abolition of Humberside, with slightly different borders. The government office entity which currently contains most of Yorkshire is the Yorkshire and the Humber region of England. This region includes a northern slice of Lincolnshire, but does not include the northern part of the ceremonial county of North Yorkshire, which is in the North East England region. Other parts of the historic county of Yorkshire are also in other official regions. Saddleworth, the Forest of Bowland, Sedbergh and Denter in the North West England region, and Upper Teesdale is in North East England. Geography. Physical and geological main articles. Geology of Yorkshire and list of places in Yorkshire. Historically, the northern boundary of Yorkshire was the River Tees. The eastern boundary was the North Sea coast and the southern boundary was the Humber estuary and rivers Don and Sheaf. The western boundary meandered along the western slopes of the Pennine Hills to again meet the River Tees. It is bordered by several other historic counties in the form of County Durham, Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Cheshire, Lancashire and Westmoreland. In Yorkshire there is a very close relationship between the major topographical areas and the geological period in which they were formed. The Pennine chain of hills in the west is of Carboniferous origin. The Central Vale is Permo-Triassic. The North York Moors in the northeast of the county are Jurassic in age, while the Yorkshire Wolds to the southeast are Cretaceous chalk uplands. Yorkshire is drained by several rivers. In western and central Yorkshire the many rivers empty their waters into the River Eries, which reaches the North Sea via the Humber estuary. The most northerly of the rivers in the Ouse system is the River Swale, which drains Swaledale before passing through Richmond and meandering across the Vale of Mowbray. Next, draining Wensleydale, is the River Ewer, which the Swale joins east of Boroughbridge. Near Great Ouseburn the Ewer is joined by the small Ouse Gilbeck, and below the confluence the river is known as the Ouse. The River Nid rises on the edge of the Yorkshire Dales National Park and flows along Nidderdale before reaching the Vale of York in the Ouse. The River Wharfe, which drains Wharfedale, joins the Ouse upstream of Carwood. The rivers Ayr and Calder are more southerly contributors to the River Ouse, and the most southerly Yorkshire tributary is the River Don, which flows northwards to join the main river at Goole. Further north and east the River Derwent rises on the North York Moors, flows south then westwards through the Vale of Pickering, then turns south again to drain the eastern part of the Vale of York. It empties into the River Ouse at Barnby on the Marsh. The smaller River Esk flows from west to east at the northern foot of the North York Moors to reach the sea at Whitby. To the east of the Yorkshire Wolds the River Hull flows southwards to join the Humber estuary at Kingston upon Hull. The western Pennines are served by the River Ribble, which drains westwards into the Irish Sea close to Lytham St Anne's. Natural areas. The countryside of Yorkshire has acquired the common nickname of God's own county. In recent times, North Yorkshire has displaced Kent to take the title Garden of England according to The Guardian. Yorkshire includes the North York Moors and Yorkshire Dales National Parks, and part of the Peak District National Park. Nidderdale and the Howardian Hills are designated areas of outstanding natural beauty. Spurn Point, Flamborough Head and the coastal North York Moors are designated heritage coast areas, and are noted for their scenic views with rugged cliffs such as the Jet Cliffs at Whitby, the Limestone Cliffs at Filey and the Chalk Cliffs at Flamborough Head. Moorhouse, Upper Teesdale, most of which is a part of the former North Riding of Yorkshire, is one of England's largest national nature reserves. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds runs nature reserves such as the one at Bempton Cliffs with coastal wildlife such as the northern gannet, Atlantic puffin and razorbill. Spurn Point is a narrow, 3 miles long sandspit It is a national nature reserve owned by the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and is noted for its cyclical nature, whereby the spit is destroyed and recreated approximately once every 250 years. There are seaside resorts in Yorkshire with sandy beaches. Scarborough is Britain's oldest seaside resort, dating back to the Spa Town era in the 17th century. While Whitby has been voted as the United Kingdom's best beach, with her postcard-perfect harbour. Historically, Yorkshire was divided into 3 ridings and the Ainsty of York. The term riding is of Viking origin and derives from thrething, meaning of third part. The 3 ridings in Yorkshire were named the East Riding, West Riding and North Riding. The East and North Ridings of Yorkshire were separated by the River Derwent, and the West and North Ridings were separated by the Ouse and the Yare watershed. In 1974 the 3 ridings of Yorkshire were abolished and York, which had been independent of the 3 ridings, was incorporated into the new county called North Yorkshire. It later became part of York Unitary Authority.